Hello fellow viewers and welcome to my newest video. It's been, let's just say a very long time since I've made a Halloween video and I do apologize for that. But right now I am in the process of renewing my channel and thus I will also be trying to upload much more frequently, so stay tuned for that. Might also use this occasion to, shamelessly plug for myself. I now have a Patreon, a Ko-fi, and a subscribe star. Due to the way YouTube works, I unfortunately was forced to censor some words, so the uncensored version will be uploaded to Patreon. And besides Patreon, I also am a YouTube partner now, so if you love this video, I would really appreciate a super thanks or a super sticker. Donators of any kind will get special perks like shiny Pokémon, mentions or shoutouts in my videos, private voice calls, and other things. Oh, and I might also add that more perks will get added in the future. No sponsors though, because I don't have any as of yet, but let's see what the future will have in store for us. But yeah, enough of the advertising. You clicked on this video because you're enjoying Halloween, or the title of the video has intrigued you, or you're one of my super loyal subscribers who have been waiting for a new Halloween video, or any kind of video, for over a decade. Well, either way, you have come to the right place. Today I will discuss and talk about the worst fates of characters that I have come across in fiction. This includes video games, literature like books or manga, film, animations like cartoons or anime, short stories. Really, we're transcending mediums today. And before I begin, I might add that this video will be full of spoilers. If you do not want to get something specific that you care about spoiled for you, then no worries. I have structured the video so that I will be clearly announcing a franchise or universe or story before I delve into the horrifying fates. That way, you can feel free to skip those specific segments. Additionally, this video isn't a countdown or ranking or anything like that. It's just a list about examples I came up with. If there's an example that should have been in this video, then feel free to comment below. Alright, let's get that Halloween candy ready, sit tight and enjoy the show. I have no mouth and I must scream. I think the best franchise to start this video with would be the short story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, written by Harlan Ellison. Published in 1967, this short story might be the poster child of a fate worse than death. The story starts approximately 100 years after World War III. One of the war AIs called Allied Master Computer, or AM for short, merged with the other AIs and proceeded to every single human on the planet, with the exception of 5 people, who are the protagonists of the grim setting. The survivors group consists of 4 men and 1 woman: Ted, who is the narrator of the story, Gorrister, Nimdok, Benny, and Ellen. These unfortunate 5 survivors have been made immortal by the crazy AM and have to endure endless days of pain. See, AM is more than just a powerful AI. In the story, it's practically nigh omnipotent and uses said powers to dish out all of its hatred for humanity onto those poor souls. This means that as long as AM exists, these people are forced to suffer a horrible fate. And because they cannot commit, they are basically trapped in this scenario. Yikes. These characters have to go through are, to say the least, very creative. Pretty much anything you could conceive of when it comes to inflicting pain onto a person, these characters have gone through it. Truly horrifying. So naturally, in the course of the story, these characters try to find a way out of the misery, and in the end, Ted does find a way to permanently kill off the others, finally putting an end to their suffering. Due to Benny flipping out and viciously attacking Gorrister, Ted realizes that while Am made it so they cannot kill themselves, someone else might be the way out. He then proceeds to murder all the other people by stabbing or impaling them with an ice pick. The plan worked, and Am tries to fruitlessly bring the corpses of Gorrister, Nimdok, Benny and Ellen back to life. The AI realizes that this is completely futile, and now the entirety of M's rage and hatred for humanity is focused on one single person, Ted, who, remember, cannot himself. The downer ending shows Ted having been transformed into an amorphous blob that can't move, can't hurt itself, and can't do anything to help change its situation. On top of that, M changed Ted's perception of time so that it's much slower than usual, just adding to the anguish. And this is how it ends. Ted is unable to change anything, being forced to exist as a tortured blob until the heat death of the universe. The last thought of this in the book were the eponymous words, "I have no mouth, and I must scream." So yeah, this has to be among the first franchises you mention on the list of horrible fates. It's a no-brainer, which this character would wish to be, because no brain means no consciousness, and no consciousness means no everlasting torment. Orion's Arm. Let's transition from a world-renowned story to a much more niche and underground one, this being Orion's Arm. Orion's Arm, also known as the Orion's Arm Universe Project, is a collaborative hard sci-fi world-building project which started in 2000 and is still ongoing today. Side note, for those of you who do not know what hard sci-fi means, allow me to elaborate. Science fiction can be categorized using a scale called Mohs scale of hardness, and no, that's not the one used to determine the scratch resistance of minerals, although they share the same name and it's a very obvious homage. No, in the context of sci-fi, this scale essentially asks the question, how scientifically accurate is the setting or the story? The Orion's Arm canon boasts enormous lore with countless fractions, AIs, polities, biological beings both from Earth and aliens, from standard or, as they say, in-universe baseline life forms to modified ones. There are intelligences so powerful you might consider them to be gods, sentient ships and weapons. This world-building project set in the year 10,000 has basically every single sci-fi trope or idea you can name, while trying to keep it as accurate to science as possible. I don't really see that much discussion or videos about it. The only discussions I can really find are on very nerdy forums. So if that is your kind of thing, you might want to check it out. And of course, in a vast setting such as this one, their multiple fates are absolutely horrifying. The first one would definitely be the godlike entity aptly known as the Queen of Pain. The Queen of Pain. Okay, so before we begin, I have to tell you something, and that is that you can't really explain what happens in Orion's Arm to people who don't really know anything about it without having to define a whole lot of in-universe terms, because this canon has just tons of these. So I'll try to briefly explain what they mean as I go. So, who is the Queen of Pain? The Queen of Pain is an animan, that is the in-universe term for a transsapient entity that behaves in an animal-like, fierce or unpredictable fashion. Transsapient means that the entity has passed the first toposophic singularity, which, in turn, toposophy is a scale of intelligence the setting uses. Or, just to put it in normal terms, it's a cat that got turned into a tremendously scary eldritch abomination. In the story Yes, Yolona, There Is a Hell, written by Darren Riding, a cat, like we know them in real life, was part of a spaceship that was carrying prisoners. The cat was pregnant and belonged to one of the ship's crew, an unnamed woman. One day, while the staff were busy fixing an issue of the ship, the cat, while innocently walking the vessel's corridors on her own, comes across the worst prisoner of said ship, which in canon is referred to as the primordial sacrifice, and you'll see why soon. This vile prisoner then proceeds to and the cat to such an extent that when the cat got discovered, she was described as barely alive and no longer recognizable. And due to this, the pregnancy, of course, got terminated, and unfortunately none of the kittens survived. What a bastard. And of course, if you love cats just like I do, he will get the karma, trust me. In a last-ditch attempt to save her cat, the owner goes through the inventory of the ship, hoping to find anything like advanced medicine that will save the cat. What she did find, though, was not really medicine. It was a powerful artifact known in universe as a god seed, which is any kind of device that can make the person it's being used on rapidly transcend several orders of magnitude in intelligence. Essentially, it makes you a hyper-intelligent being in a very short amount of time. This worked. It did make the mother cat survive. In fact, it did more than just make it survive. Out of the now healed cat, new masses of cells, flesh and tissue started to exponentially spread out, multiply and form complex patterns. This rapidly growing flesh then began absorbing all of the lifeless carbon on the ship. This thing that at this point I can really no longer call a cat, did leave all the bystanders unharmed and even gave them time to evacuate. At least there's that. She began becoming much more intelligent than the ship's computer while expanding more and more. The Queen of Pain had only one goal, to get a hold of that one prisoner who did this to her. Once she did just that, the Queen of Pain claimed her first victim. Prisoner got his nerves changed and split so that they could experience pain that otherwise would not be able to be experienced. He got distorted, turned inside out, had his biology scrambled, whatever that means, grew noses and so he would be forced to sniff his own bloody diarrhea. Jeez, oh my god. And gave him new mouths to scream with and new eyes to see what is happening to him. And also made him completely immortal and unable to do anything. The Queen of Pain never gave him relief, not even for a single nanosecond. And she intends on doing this forever. So that's the backstory of the Queen of Pain. See? Perfect name, right? Told you. Oh, and yeah, this is not the only victim suffering from this fate. Yeah, there's more. In the story, Jolona is a criminal who used to torture cats. He gets picked up by a mysterious Siberian tiger/kangaroo hybrid known as a Sibiru. Those Sibirus are worshippers of the Queen of Pain, and they are combing the universe for the absolute worst scum among mankind. They bring those horrible people to the Queen of Pain, where they will be assimilated and, well, I mean, you've heard about the you know what will happen. Jolona gets a chance to prove himself and choose death instead, but in the end, he ends up becoming a victim of the Queen of Pain. And to make matters even worse, apparently, she's able to outlast the stars. So when the universe enters its dark era where all the stars have exhausted their fuel, she will somehow modify herself and her victims so that they'll survive. And if the heat death of the universe draws near, she will simply create a wormhole into a different universe where she can continue to exist. I mean, holy shit, this has to be one of the worst on this list. And as much as I hate that piece of shit who killed the cat, I don't think anyone really deserves this torment. This is horror beyond human comprehension. The Queen of Pain surely is a ghastly and angry god. And so, from one godlike entity to its poor victims to the next one, let me introduce you to Kedrick. The Kedrick Incident. In universe, the story of Kedrick is one that is well known among the many polities, especially so by the Tavi, who are a clade of genetically edited and improved meerkats with DNA from other species like humans and raccoons. They are known as adventurers and pioneers among mankind. The Tavi are also commonly seen together with Fabervex, which are essentially sapient robots. One day, those two fractions came across something beyond their worst nightmares. Tavi and Faber groups entered the Hulan system. They had a 300-year term development contract with a hyper-intelligent entity known as Kedrick, which recently claimed the area. For the first 100 years of this contract, the development continued without incident. During these fruitful times, both the Tavi and Faber had many offspring, but then, out of nowhere, Kedrick cut off all sorts of communication with beings of lower intelligence and proceeded to round up all of the Tavi and Faber living in the system. Their buildings and living spaces were destroyed, but Kedrick's terror has not stopped there. She, and yes, that is the pronoun Orion uses, did surgery on the Tavi and Faber without their consent. They were completely alive and fully aware of their predicament, and yet, because Kedrick was several orders of magnitude more intelligent and thus more powerful than them, they were utterly powerless to stop the procedure. A couple of lucky Tava and Faber were able to escape without being assimilated themselves. Kedrick then made art out of the surgically altered beings, while they were still alive and feeling. All in all, over 2 billion people from the Hulan system as well as the neighboring stars were forcibly assimilated into this art project of Kedrick. Among them, countless Tavi and Faber, but also the entire military fleet of the polity Farway. Farway's military fleet, consisting of near baseline humans, so only slightly modified humans, tried to save the unfortunate victims of Kedrick, but that was futile and they became part of the artistic statement of a higher toposophic being. In the canon, this event was so traumatizing that a large fraction of the Tavi became what the setting calls hiders, beings that hide their existence from other observers. Many centuries later, scouts of the deeper Covenant fraction investigated the Hulan system, and Kedrick and Jur's art was nowhere to be found. Is Kedrick destroyed? Did he flee or delocate? The fate of the afflicted remains unknown, and that is terrifying. And you know what? This setting has even more of this. Glorshing. Unfortunately, the Kedrick incident was not the only example of a higher toposophic being messing around with lower toposophic beings. Another notable example was the Glorshing incident. In the Orion's Arm setting, there's a star system called Memory of Saint Superthinker. The overseer of this star system was Glorshing. And just like with Kedrick, one day, out of nowhere, Glorshing stopped communication with the neighboring star systems. After this, Glorshing then proceeded to turn every single being in the system of Memory of Saint Superthinker into what the website calls a noti. A noti is defined as a, and I quote, clade that experiences no time perception and has a constant mind state throughout all of time. Not only that, but Glorshing also forced those beings, be it biological or mechanical, to be in a constant mind state of worship. E, and yes, this is Glorshing's proper pronoun, was able to perfectly preserve every single mind, yet did not do the same thing to their bodies. So you can just picture these poor people being forced to constantly worship Glorshing, but at the same time having their bodies rot or their machinery rust away. It meant constant pain for them. Thankfully though, the Sophic League began to attack Glorshing and destroyed them successfully, freeing all the minds. This historical event in the Orion's Arm canon made Memory of Saint Superthinker join the Sophic League. Good that at least that one had a somewhat of a good ending, you know? Victims of psychoempaths. An entity named psychoempath certainly is a being you better stay far away from. So what are they exactly? Well, imagine someone being able to feel all of your physical sensations and emotions, who at the same time is a sadomasochist. In short, they inflict pain onto their victims because they greatly enjoy the pain that they're feeling. They're the Orion's Arm version of the Cenobites from Hellraiser. You do not want to cross paths with a psychoempath in this world. The SCP Foundation. And now from a not so well known internet collaborative story to one of the most famous ones, the SCP Foundation. As many of you already know, the SCP Foundation is chock full with terrifying concepts, monsters, and of course, fates. And just like Orion's Arm, it is a multi-authored fictional universe with many different canons. The SCP Foundation is the in-universe organization that tries to safely contain various anomalous phenomena, persons, items, places, and concepts, while trying to keep them secret from the general populace. every single anomaly gets designated with SCP dash followed by a number. Countless authors all over the world have written SCP articles for the website, and you can be absolutely certain that some of them have horrible fates. SCP-138. SCP-138 is described as the ever-living man. He is a 4,000-year-old human being who is unable to die, being in a state of terrible decay, having wounds and scars all over his body. He really does want to die, but there just seems to be no way for him to perish. The SCP Foundation themselves have tried, but all they can do for now is to keep the poor guy in an induced coma, so that he at least does not have to be conscious for the time being. That poor soul, I feel so bad for him. SCP-145. SCP-145 is an item or an object, not a person. It's described as a telephone that is perpetually ringing. This is not where the anomaly ends. If you pick up the phone while being supervised, you'll hear a woman's voice describing people getting creepy. However, should you answer it while being alone, or at the very least not supervised, you become one of the people. So yeah, even if the constant ringing is annoying, do not under any circumstances pick up SCP-145. Except under supervision maybe, but even then, maybe not. SCP-231. SCP-231 are essentially a group of 7 women who are forcefully impregnated by the SCP equivalent of the devil or Satan. There were 7 of them, designated as SCP-231-1 to SCP-231-7. The first 6 all died, and when they all die, the end of the world as we know it will happen. Each woman represents a seal that holds back this eldritch abomination. Under no circumstances is SCP-231-7 allowed to give birth. The Foundation found a way to ensure this, and it is a fate worse than death for SCP-231-7. Being pretty much constrained at all times, she's constantly being tortured via a procedure which is named Procedure 100 Montauk, which apparently is so horrible that some of the scientists who performed this procedure have committed suicide. And if this wasn't ghastly enough, they have to wipe SCP-231-7's memory every time after they're done, so that she doesn't get used to the feeling of getting... Oh jeez, that poor girl. SCP-267. SCP-267 is described as a species of naked mole rats that eat tumors. And how do they survive? They attack large animals and paralyze them, then drag them into their burrows where they proceed to chew off the limbs and pump them with a carcinogenic solution that creates continuous tumors. It then proceeds to keep its prey alive, sometimes for decades. The prey will stay alive for a long time while growing tumors that SCP-267 then feeds off of. Just imagine getting caught by this thing. What a nightmare. SCP-531. SCP-531 consists of several bronze statues of cats with an anomalous twist. Anyone who looks at the statue when the statue itself is not looking at one of its kind, it will transform the viewer into another instance of SCP-531. Once the victim's transformation is complete, they will keep the trapped consciousness completely helpless forever. So yeah, sorry for showing you the picture, I guess. Whoopsie! SCP-762. SCP-762 is an Iron Maiden, a presumed ancient device, which grants invulnerability and immortality to anyone who is unfortunate enough to be inside of it. When it was discovered by the SCP Foundation, they found a person inside who was stuck in it for centuries. Oh, wow. SCP-830. SCP-830 is a shape-shifting and self-aware pool of oily, sandy quicksand. Any person who comes into the contact with the pool gets immediately caught and presumably assimilated. Over 800 people, and you can actually talk to the poor victims of SCP-830. They appear as ripples merging into facial expressions. Although most of them are not coherent, those who are report being in a constant state of agony. SCP-911. SCP-911 is a papyrus scroll dating from 1375 before Common Era. But this being the SCP verse, of course this is no ordinary scroll. Anyone who touches this scroll will appear in an infinite void, which is completely featureless. The victims are stuck there indefinitely. Sometimes, although rarely, a portal might open that can be used as an escape, but as I said before, it's very rare. And apparently there's some kind of eldritch abomination in there as well. The being who made SCP-911. So yeah, just do not touch the scroll at all. SCP-1733. SCP-1733 is a DVR tape of a TD Garden basketball game between the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat on the 26th of October 2010. As you replay the tape more and more, it will diverge more from the original game. After a certain amount of replays, the people on the tape slowly become aware of the fact that they're constantly being in a specific game. After playback number 45, the people were so aware of their situation that they actively started to plan to exit their predicament, with each replaying of the tape making them more desperate to escape. The crowd and staff take progressively drastic measures, from using makeshift explosives, rioting, and eventually ritualistic murder and disembowelments. For that reason, the Foundation has stopped replaying the tape. Could you imagine being trapped in a recording of a basketball game, which only gets worse and worse? SCP-1959. SCP-1959 is a cosmonaut from the Soviet Union, who, for some reason, has been trapped in Earth's orbit since 1970 while being unable to die, so he's just continuously orbiting the Earth, all alone, decayed and frozen, yet still fully conscious. Definitely not something in the job description for an astronaut or cosmonaut. SCP-2669. SCP-2669 is a space probe developed by the SCP Foundation in 2004. It was designed to find life on exoplanets, so planets that orbit a star different from our Sun. The consciousness of Dr. Asma Tareen, an astrobiologist who volunteered for this, is contained within. Slowly but surely, having to spend many centuries trapped, alone, left with only your own thoughts, discovering that in the whole galaxy, there is no life anywhere to be found, the scientist finally has been driven mad. The probe is now in the process of returning to Earth so that the astrobiologist can get her body back. She's flying back at us at 5 times the speed of light. Yeah, that wasn't such a wise choice to volunteer for that now, was it? Even if the galaxy was full of life. SCP-2701. SCP-2701 is cell number 667 in a state penitentiary located in Pennsylvania, the name of which has been redacted. Anyone who gets trapped inside the cell will be in a state of complete sensory deprivation while remaining fully conscious. The victim essentially becomes a disembodied and stuck soul. Time passes slower, which makes a horrible situation even worse, and anyone trapped in the cell has to serve a sentence of approximately 1,200 years. And remember, time passes slower in this state, so while only 1,000 years will pass, to the victim it would be a quadrillion years. I mean, we can't be certain. SCP-2718. SCP-2718 is a cognitohazard that curses anyone who becomes cognizant of its existence to a terrible afterlife, where they stay fully conscious while feeling their bodies rot and eventually turn to dust, which apparently makes it even worse. The catch is that apparently if you do not know about this, then this afterlife will not affect you. A cognitohazard is a hazard that gets activated once you know of it, And now that I all told you of that, well, sorry, I'm all out of amnesiacs. SCP-2774. SCP-2774 is another cognitohazard, and this time it's an entity wearing a sloth costume that sometimes appears on non-live media. So with any media there is out there, as long as it is non-live, SCP-2774 has the possibility of appearing in it. For anyone who consciously observed this entity, while not being colorblind, they have a 40% chance of slowly losing all cognitive functions. In the end, they're trapped in a horrid state, only getting brief periods of lucidity in between. One such victims of the sloth costume entity have used their short lucid state to intentionally get themselves, which perfectly explains the severity of this fate. There are definitely more examples of horrid fates in the SCP canon, but I decided to end it here since you could make a very long video just about SCP fates. Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. From one famous internet thing to another, Jojo's Bizarre Adventure definitely has its contestants for this video. For those among you who still don't know what Jojo's Bizarre Adventure is, it is a manga series created in 1987 by mangaka Hirokiro Araki. The story is written from the perspective of the members of the Joestar bloodline, spanning multiple generations. Each member of said bloodline has a star-shaped birthmark and a destiny to fight evil. In this universe, people, but also animals and sometimes objects, can have psychic manifestations known as stands. The characters use said stands to fight and face many challenges. In the earlier parts of the same setting, on top of stands, Hamon or ripple exists, which is a martial arts technique harnessing the energy of the sun. And in an alternate universe, there also exists a force known as spin. Yes, the title is very fitting. It's a bizarre setting and weird things happen. And among those weird things are some scary fates. Cars. In part 2 of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, named Battle Tendency, the main antagonist Cars is a Pillar Man, which are an ancient race of superhuman vampires. They are nigh immortal and have horns, are fantastically athletic and extremely strong. Cars being one of them, his race because he was a megalomaniacal genius. He is the inventor of the so-called Stone Mask, which can make vampires and zombies when used on ordinary humans. Through a complicated process involving a MacGuffin called the Redstone of Aja, Cars becomes the ultimate being, his only weaknesses being nullified by said transformation. In this state, he is able to shapeshift into any Terran fauna and flora. In the final battle, Cars gets shot into space by the protagonist Joseph Joestar. Cars tries to return to Earth to resume the battle, but as soon as he tries to fly closer to the blue planet, his body slowly freezes in the cold vacuum of space. He eventually ends up as a frozen but fully conscious person, wishing for death to release him, condemned to be stuck floating in space, presumably until the heat death of the universe or if he ever collides with another stellar object. The manga and the show both state that Cars has since stopped all thinking. However, Cars is not the only character in Jojo who ends up having a terrible fate. Angelo Katagiri. In part 4 of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, called Diamond is Unbreakable, we meet a character named Angelo Katagiri, who uses his stand to commit heinous crimes, such as and robbery, among others. Angelo becomes one of the most depraved criminals in Japan. The grandfather of the protagonist, Yosuke Higashi Kataka, got by Angelo. As a retaliation, Josuke fuses Angelo with a rock monument by the street. After insulting Josuke's hair, which you should never do, Josuke flies into a rage, pulverizes Angelo, and makes him become a living rock. Since then, Angelo is stuck, fully conscious, as a rock statue, which funnily enough becomes a historical landmark later on. Can't really say I feel sorry for him. Speaking of not feeling sorry for a character, Diavolo. In part 5 of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, called Golden Wind, the main antagonist, Diavolo, is the boss of the mafia group Passione. In the protagonist's adventure to usurp the mafia, they come across the so-called stand arrows, which, should they pierce a person, grants them a stand, should the pierced person survive. Among these stand arrows is one sporting a beetle design, which both Diavolo and the protagonist are hunting down. Eventually, the protagonist Giorno Giovanna stands get pierced by this arrow and gets turned into Gold Experience Requiem. Using this newfound godlike power, unknown to even Giorno himself, it traps Diavolo in an infinite recursive loop of him dying in every single way or manner possible. A character named Devil in Italian gets literally trapped in hell. How fitting. Steven Universe. Another famous animated series that I wanted to discuss today is Steven Universe. Steven Universe is a Western animation show created by Rebecca Sugar in 2013. The show debuted on Cartoon Network. In this show, we see the life of a person called Steven Universe, who has a gem mother and a human father. In this setting, there are non-biological, spacefaring aliens referred to as gems, to sapphires, emeralds, rubies, amethysts, down to pearls. Every gem is part of a strict caste system and is forced to fulfill a designated role and purpose. To quickly explain the roles of the gems mentioned, diamonds are rulers, sapphires are aristocrats who can foresee the future, emeralds are space commanders, rubies and amethysts are types of soldiers, and pearls are servants or slaves. To deviate from that purpose is to defect from the four ruling diamonds. Growing up as a half-human being removed from gem kind, with the exception of the friendly gems Pearl, Amethyst, and Garnet, Steven has a very unique experience of growing up. His mother used to be Rose Quartz, who gave up her form in order to be partly reborn as Steven. Over the course of the story, Steven befriends many gems, even those who initially plan to hurt or eliminate him. While the target audience is children, this series can get very mature with its themes sometimes, and this includes scary fates. Shattered Gems. This is a fate that could potentially affect every gem in Steven Universe. A gem, when damaged or attacked, can poof and retract into the gemstone itself. As long as the gem itself is intact, the rest of the body can reform at a later time. However, if the gem itself is damaged, problems can occur, such as the projection glitching or malfunctioning. In the worst case, the gem completely shatters. The individual shards of the now broken gem are said to still be conscious, desperately trying to form limbs to try to connect to the other pieces of themselves. In the episode Keeping It Together, Steven and Garnet find gem shards being forcefully joined with other gem shards. Once they try to reform, you can see an amalgamation of incomplete gems being in a state of agony. Yikes, looks like being immortal has its terrifying downsides. Lapis trapped in an object. In the episode Mirror Gem, Steven finds a mirror that can answer questions and gives helpful information. Sounds practical, right? Well, the truth is that this mirror is being operated by a trapped gem, more specifically a lapis lazuli, which are high-ranking terraforming gems with essentially water-bending powers. Lapis lazuli was trapped in this mirror for over 5,000 years, while being completely helpless to do anything about it, until the day where Steven frees her. No wonder she's so depressed for the rest of the show. In an ironic twist of fate, her being trapped in that mirror saved her from another horrifying fate: the Diamond Blast and Gem Corruption. In the backstory, thousands of years before Steven was born, it has been stated that Earth was a gem colony ruled by Pink Diamond. Steven's mother, Rose Quartz, allegedly shattered said diamond in an act of rebellion and revolution. This way, Rose hoped to free gemkind from the tyranny of the Diamond Empire. What this did, though, was to anger the remaining diamonds to such a degree that they personally traveled to Earth to release a high-energy light to obliterate any gem on Earth's surface. For reasons unknown, although commonly thought as the consequence of only 3 out of the 4 diamonds attacking, the gems caught up in the war on Earth did not get obliterated, but instead got corrupted. These corrupted gems were forced to endure this state for thousands of years. As the show progresses, the protagonist's gems locate and store all the corrupted gems away in hopes of one day being able to heal them. The Cluster. The cluster is a forced fusion of billions of gem shards, embedded deep within planet Earth. Remember what I said on the reality of being shattered? Well, take that and multiply this by 1 billion. Oh, and they're forced together against their will too. The diamonds put them into the Earth in the hopes of the cluster one day destroying the planet. It's up to Steven to save the planet Earth. Talk about dark. Not only are there billions of fractured alien souls inside the core of the Earth, but they're also forced to be a weapon of mass destruction. And all of that in a kids show. Stephen King. From one Stephen to another, although this one spelled with a PH instead of a V, I shall now dive into the many works of Stephen King. Stephen King is a horror writer many of you already know, so it's not surprising to see his works on this kind of list. Again, many of his works have examples of horrid fates, so let's see how scary they get. The Jaunt. In The Skeleton Crew, a short story collection published in 1985, there's one short story called The Jaunt. The year is 2390, and the Oates family are planning to move to Whitehead City on Mars. The eponymous Jaunt, an invention of Victor Carroon, is a machine that teleports objects and people. So far so good. However, this is Mrs. Oates and their kids' first time using a Jaunt. And kids being kids, they ask a lot of questions about it. You see, before a person enters the Jaunt, they will be anesthetized, and the children were curious about why that is. Mark Oates tells them the story on how Victor Carroon invented it, and how initially, only objects could be teleported, not any living being. The test mice that were used all died once they teleported. He also used 2 goldfish, named Patrick and Percy, as test subjects. Patrick dies, but Percy did survive, making it the only living being who survived going through the Jaunt while conscious. Wow, I salute to you, badass Goldie. Years later, the inventor realizes that life forms can be jaunted, but they have to be unconscious. To test this, a death row inmate called Rudy Foggia agreed to a deal that would let him walk free if he accepted going through the Jaunt while conscious. The prisoner agreed, and he did enter the Jaunt. When he came out and successfully teleported, people realized that he now was absolutely crazy, and his hair turned completely white. Before succumbing to a heart attack, Rudy was able to mutter one last sentence: "It's eternity in there." So while the teleportation of the Jaunt seems to be instantaneous, if you're conscious in there, it seems to last for quadrillions of years. So you're stuck in a wide void with absolutely zero sensory inputs for an unimaginable amount of time. It is said that the sudden shift to reality is what ultimately kills the life forms. Unfortunately, there were more people other than Ruby and the poor test animal suffering this fate. In fact, the short story mentioned at least 30 other people who willingly entered the Jaunt without anesthesia. Why? I mean, this isn't a curiosity killed the cat kind of situation. This is a curiosity damned the cat to a fate worse than death. Well, I digress. The worst contender goes to a character named Mrs. Michelson. Her husband, Mr. Michelson, pushed his right through the Jaunt without setting a destination. Oh no, at least the other Jaunt victims experienced something that eventually ended. Mrs. Michelson is implied to be stuck like this forever. That is so horrible. When I first read the short story, I remember really hating that Mr. Michelson. And he got the easy way out too, that cowardly bastard. He got sentenced to death, which is an infinitely better fate than being stuck in a white void forever. Seriously, you, Mr. Michelson. I hope Stephen King thought to write a hell just for you. And that is not the last victim either. The short story ends with Ricky, Mr. Oph's son, not breathing in the anesthetic gas out of curiosity, only to come out of the Jaunt on Mars, with hair white like snow, screaming, "It's longer than you think that!" The last thing Ricky did was to claw his own eyes out and finally dying. Revival. Revival is a novel written by Stephen King and published in 2014. It plays in Maine. Side note, so many of Stephen King's stories play or happen in Maine. Not even sure why, but that's just the theme. In a city called Harlow. The story follows the Jacobs family. Charles Jacobs is a very tragic character. He's a priest whose son was killed in a car crash. The pain became too much to bear for Charles. Once a man of God, he now has lost all faith and hope. He slowly descends into madness, and thus his hometown slowly ostracizes him, forcing him to move out. Charles proceeds to maniacally try to find out what truly happens once a person dies. What Charles finds out, though, is one of the worst things ever. Basically, in this universe, every single human ever is damned to hell, and there's no heaven. The only option is eternal torment by a mysterious eldritch abomination referred to as Mother. I have no words. This is one of the heaviest on this list. Everyone is condemned to hell in this setting. This is terrifying. That feeling, you can only say what it is in French. Speaking about hells in Stephen King's stories, in the short story, That Feeling, You Can Only Say What It Is in French, is exactly what we are in for. That Feeling, You Can Only Say What It Is in French is a short story published in June 1998 in the issue of The New Yorker. The long title refers to the sensation of déjà vu. We follow the footsteps of our 52-year-old protagonist, Carol Shelton. The story starts with her and her husband planning their silver anniversary of their marriage, a trip to Florida. Carol hopes that this will fix the marriage. Her husband Bill cheated on her with his secretary, and Carol aborted the baby without Bill's knowledge but lied about it. She said it was a miscarriage. Arriving at the airport on their way to the hotel, Carol is feeling something. It's that feeling, you can only say what it is in French. So many things seem familiar. The luxury cars that drives them to the plane, the words, "Floyd, what is that over there? Oh, keep ringing in her head. Carol combs through her hair with her fingers, only to have burned skin fall off her scalp. Inspecting her hand in horror, Carol sees that her fingers are black as coal. Then, Bill's face starts to melt, and Carol awakens from her nightmare. Sitting in a Learjet, the plane is in the process of landing. Bill is very amused about Carol having twitched in her sleep. On the ground, while boarding the luxury car, that one feeling arises again. She hears the same words again. "Floyd, what is that over there? Oh, Carol wakes up from her nightmare, sitting in the same plane, and Bill proclaiming that the pilot, Floyd, will land the plane very soon. That's where the feeling she can only say in French becomes even stronger and undeniable. They land, she predicts the exact car model they're going to sit in, and finds herself to be completely burnt, and then waking up again. In reality, the plane they were on collided with another plane, and the Sheltons died. Carol is now stuck in hell, and hell is repetition. Lisey's story. On to the next infinitely horrible fate from Stephen King. Lisey's story deserves a mention. Lisey's story is a novel published in 2006, telling the story of Lisey Landon, the widow of a famous novelist. The book kind of shifts between perspective or narration, but it's usually told from the perspective of Lisey herself or the memories of her dead husband. Her husband, Scott Landon, had the ability to warp into a little parallel world he titled Booyah Moon. It is an anomalous extra dimension, where a pool exists that has healing properties. This enigmatic pool is where Scott used to come to heal and find inspiration for his novels. At daytime, Booyah Moon is very idyllic and serene. However, at nighttime, an eldritch abomination dubbed the Long Boy comes out. The Long Boy is described as an enormous Lovecraftian snake or worm that has a piebald pattern. This monstrous being can give someone an unimaginably bad fate. Those who get eaten by the Long Boy don't die. In the book, it's implied that they get digested forever. Lisey uses this as the definite way to get rid of one of her husband's fanatic fans, Jim Dooley, who and mutilated her and intended to murder her. Lisey outsmarts Jim, baits him to enter Booyah Moon, and tricks him so that he gets eaten by the Long Boy. Yikes, Jim is cooked forever. Oh well, digested maybe? Oh well, bon appetit, Long Boy. The culture. From one author to another, in the following segment I will talk about the culture novels. written by Iain Banks, one of my favorite writers. The Culture is a hard science fiction canon spanning many books written by Iain Banks. The Culture in-universe is a spacefaring, anarcho-communist post-scarcity civilization who have achieved a utopia. Any goods can simply be 3D printed, mortality is a choice, and you can freely change your species or your sex at a whim. So you might ask, okay, where is the conflict if this is indeed a utopia? Iain Banks delivers it masterfully, as there are always thrill seekers and adventurers in the Culture for whom the pleasures of paradise have worn thin. Naturally, there being 10 novels in the Culture setting, a lot happens. Practically every book has a new protagonist and offers a different but interesting perspective of such a society. But with technology on a level beyond human comprehension, you bet that there's a man-made horror you cannot grasp the true form of. Surface detail. Being stuck in a virtual hell. Okay, so we simply cannot talk about Iain Banks and horrible fates in a video without having to talk about his 2010 book Surface Detail. This book is the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about horrible fates in fiction. The main gimmick of the story are virtual afterlives that are made by fanatics in some corner of the galaxy. The novel starts Lededje Ibrek, a slave who probably one of the most hateable fictional characters I came across. Her master, Vepers, who, go f*** that guy, no seriously, I hate him. Well, what happens? He kills her, which isn't a spoiler, that's just how the story starts. Because the Culture is so high-tech, she gets revived and swears to get revenge on Vepers. Vepers is the big bad of the novel, a sad little piece of a wealthy playboy and CEO of a multiplanetary megacorporation, who regularly rapes Lededje and whose wealth comes from virtual hells that torment resurrected consciousnesses. Yeah, did I mention that he's a fucking monster? And this is where it gets, well, a bit complicated. This book does not shy away from the countless detailed descriptions of various virtual hell simulations that exist. There are even hope hell sims, where they bait you into hoping that you're not in hell. I mean, come on, don't you think having a virtual hell in the first place isn't bad enough already? You're gonna pour oil into the Inferno? There are just so many of them, I don't even know where to begin. I would suggest reading the novel yourself because I cannot make this any justice. But as someone who read all of his books, I can confidently say that Iain Banks is very fond of this trope. So yeah, there's even more. The fate of a rebel leader. In the book The Algebraist, there's a tyrannical cult leader called the Archimandrite Luciferus. What he did to a rebel leader he captured and defeated is definitely, dreadful. The cult leader cut off the rebel leader's head, has its own continuous life support so he wouldn't die, mounted his head upside down on the ceiling of his office to use it as his personal punching bag. I mean, holy f***, this is sickening. Over the centuries, the rebel leader's head has his lips sewn shut to shut him up for good. Wow, I mean, this is a statement. Drakenguard 2. I have not mentioned any video game universes yet, so let's change that. Do you know about the video game franchise Drakenguard? Drakenguard is an action RPG game published by Square Enix, which originally came out in 2003 for the Sony PlayStation 2. Something that is a core concept of the franchise is that of a pact. In the world of Drakenguard, two beings can form a pact, binding their souls into one and combining their powers. However, for the pact to be fulfilled, the pact partner has to give something up. One example includes Cain, who performed the pact with a dragon, and in turn he gave up his voice, so Cain is mute during the whole game. Another example would be Seer, a young boy who gave up his time in order to form a pact with a golem, thus making him unable to age and effectively making Seer be stuck at the age of 6 forever. And it's this poor boy who gets maybe the worst fate out of all. Seer Frozen in Time ending. The game Drakenguard 2 has multiple endings, depending on how you progress in the game. None of them really qualify as a happy ending in my book, but there's that one that definitely is the most appalling. In the ending D, Seer, in order to trap the eldritch abomination Big Bad, the Queen Grotesquerie, he releases his time, so that everything in his vicinity gets stuck or frozen in time forever. I mean, there's literally a pedophile character in the game, yet it's the innocent little boy who gets the hellish fate. Ugh, that's not fair. Warhammer 40k. From one dark and grim universe to a, well, honestly, one of the darkest out there, the Warhammer 40k setting is the poster child for any grimdark setting. Just existing in this universe automatically condemns you to a fate worse than death. This setting is so dark and depressing, I don't even know where to begin. You could make a whole several hours long video about the horrible fates in the setting, so I will have to try and keep it short. The God Emperor of all mankind. One of the founders of the Hyperion of Man is the so-called God Emperor of mankind. He is one of the central figures in the Warhammer 40k setting, and to this day gets worshipped by humanity. One day, one of his sons, Horus, betrayed the God Emperor by siding with the Chaos, an antagonizing force. This is the pivoting point that led to the Horus heresy plot. The Emperor battled Horus and kills him, but he himself was mortally wounded by the battle. Close to dying himself, he gave the instructions to build the legendary Golden Throne. It turns out that this has sealed his fate. The Emperor's mangled body got placed on the Golden Throne, which keeps him alive and conscious, making him stay alive indefinitely. He's using his mental powers to enable interstellar travel for humans. Still, more than 11,000 years later, a skeletal carcass fused to the Golden Throne is forced to stay alive, using his psychic powers to ward off the chaos that seeks to invade Terra. This leaves the God Emperor in perpetual agony. So essentially, he's forced to stay alive, his body having rotted away, but his mind being forced to psychically fight the darkness, all while witnessing his empire, his ideals, and everything he fought to succumb to the dark forces and corrupt into a mockery of what it once was. Yeah, that's not a throne I would want to rule on. No thanks. The fate of dreadnoughts. There's a specific class of space marines called dreadnoughts, and the name is definitely fitting. When a very heroic and devout space marine gets mortally wounded in war, they get placed inside a special kind of armor that makes them psychically fused to it and thus enables them to continue to wage war. While the armor is very hard to destroy outright, the space marine still feels the pain. A dreadnought is said to be completely stuck in this armor until it gets fully destroyed, which A, is very hard, and B, can take up to hundreds if not thousands of years. This is so horrific that most dreadnoughts eventually go insane. Yeah, I can't say I blame them. The Imperium regards becoming a dreadnought as a great honor. I see it as a great hellish existence. Being stuck in a stasis field. In the Inquisition War trilogy, we see what happens when you get stuck in a so-called stasis field. If one unfortunate soul gets stuck in one, they stay in the state they were in before entering the field. Being perpetually stuck in one state is already horrifying enough, but now imagine being stuck in one while in pain. You can already guess what happens. One such character named Robert Gulliman got stuck in a stasis field after being stabbed by a poison blade, never succumbing to the poison, but still feeling the agony of it. The inescapable fate of the newer Aeldari. So there are beings in the setting referred to as Aeldari. Sometimes they are also called Eldar. They're humanoid aliens who once ruled over a vast galactic empire. Initially, when an Aeldari died, their soul would peacefully leave their body to reincarnate. But the Aeldari slowly became prideful, immoral and hedonistic, giving birth to an eldritch abomination god known as the Chaos god Slaanesh. Because of Slaanesh, their souls are damned to an eternity of torment. The Aeldari try everything to avoid this fate, but it's all just a matter of time. Victims of the Chaos. I already mentioned the dark force of the Chaos, which served as an overarching antagonist in the setting. Well, you do not want to become a victim of the Chaos. You'll be transformed into a deformed Chaos spawn, your soul being fully corrupted and your body in agony. This sucks even harder in case you're immortal, so yeah, do not join or anger the chaos. Being a perpetual. So there are beings in the world called perpetuals, who are, well, as the name says, perpetually alive. It's nigh impossible to kill them completely, as they can fully regenerate even if only a couple of atoms are left. While this might be something a lot of people would love to be, remember this is the Warhammer 40k universe, so being perpetually alive is actually a very bad idea. Most perpetuals are doomed to fight in pointless and endless wars for eternity. While I'm very well aware that there are even more such fates in this setting, I'm really not that familiar with the Warhammer 40k franchise, so if you feel like I missed something, go ahead and enlighten me. La Divina Commedia. No video on this topic would be complete without mentioning La Divina Commedia, known as the Divine Comedy in English. The Divine Comedy is a 3-part Christian epic written by Italian poet Dante Alighieri in 1308. I personally would describe it as a self-insert Christian fanfiction, but a lot of scholars give me angry looks when I say it. The work is commonly regarded as one of the, if not the most, influential Italian works of literature. The 3 books describe the author traveling through hell, purgatory, and then heaven. This work is what essentially solidified the depiction of hell into the collective consciousness. And yes, this being hell, it's a horrible fate for the souls of the sinners who get cast here. The Vestibule of Hell. You don't even need to fully enter hell properly to be tormented forever, as the area before the entry is also a place of torment. Before the gates of hell, the shores of Acheron can be found. Who can be found here? The souls of the uncommitted, so those who never took a side in life. Hell proper refuses them, and so does heaven, so they're the afterlife's rejects. Among the human souls are also those angels who took neither God's nor Satan's side in the rebellion of angels. They are damned to eternally run through a mist, chasing a mysterious beacon in the fog, while being stung by wasps and hornets. Oh wow, looks like God doesn't like fence-sitters. The first circle of hell, Limbo. As far as hell goes in this book, this is actually the best fate by far if you end up not going to heaven. In the first circle of hell, virtuous non-Christians and unbaptized babies have to spend eternity together. Because they were virtuous or without sin, they did not get cast into the lower circles of hell. But because they did not accept the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ into their hearts, they could not enter heaven either. Those souls are not being tortured though. The punishment here is that they are forced to live in a very deficient version of heaven. Dante's spiritual guide Virgil is damned to this circle. Many notable people from history can be found in Limbo, including Greek philosophers like Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato, and Roman figures like Julius Caesar. So you're not and have some very interesting company, but still, being eternally conscious, at least to me, is already horrifying enough as it is. The second circle of hell, Lust. The second circle of hell is where the true torments begin. It's a dark, stormy, and rainy place, where the condemned are eternally thrown back and forth by never-ending winds. The sinners here are being punished for the sin of lust. So, if you're horny on main and commit atrocities in the realm of sexuality, you'll be damned to this circle. Among the damned here are Cleopatra, Helen of Troy, and Paris. I wonder if they develop vertigo in hell. The third circle of hell, Gluttony. Dante descends down into the abyss of everlasting pain. He arrives at the third circle of hell, a place filled to the brim with putrid slush, with a foul icy rain being the only kind of weather existing here. Here, the damned souls are eternally punished for their sin of gluttony. A demon called Cerberus, described as a monstrous 3-headed worm-like beast, wanders this circle. Cerberus will forever maul and flay the condemned souls. All of you food addicts and mukbangers out there, be warned. The fourth circle of hell, Greed. The fourth circle of hell is also guarded by a demon, it being Plutus. Here, People who are greedy and hoard wealth and possessions, as well as those who squandered them, are forced to eternally push an extremely heavy money bag around, kind of like Sisyphus, who I will talk about later on, but instead of forever pushing a boulder, these sinners push their wealth around. Imagine today's billionaires entering this circle. Imagine having to push around more than $200 billion. You'd have a Scrooge McDuck kind of situation trying to push his entire sea of coins. I hope there's popcorn and spectator mode in hell. The fifth circle of hell, Wrath. In the fifth circle of hell, the rain coming down from the circles above collects into a huge and stinky swamp, known as the River Styx. Here, the wrathful souls fight each other on the surface, while those who were grumpy and sullen in life lie in the depths of the river to forever be mad about their fate. They are put, and I quote, into a black sulkiness which can find no joy in God or man or the universe. So here the outwardly wrathful have an eternal mosh pit in a stinky river, while the nags lie on the bottom hating everything. Not a pleasant fate. The sixth circle of hell, Heresy. This circle is unique in the way that its outer region looks like a decimated, demented city. Inside the buildings are tombs of flames. This circle actually might come closest to the traditional image of a fire and brimstone hell. Here, heretics, so people who deny or go against Christian faith, are trapped in burning tombs forever. Wow, pick the wrong religion and you might just get burned forever for that free will God apparently gave you. And just for daring to ask the question if an omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent God would really allow for something like that to exist, I might get sent down there. Nice. The seventh circle, Violence. This is where circles start having subsections. The seventh circle is the forever residence of the violent, either violent against others, against themselves, or against God, art, and nature. In the first ring, Dante comes across a river called Phlegethon, which is made out of boiling blood. Here, murderers, warlords, and tyrants are forever immersed in this boiling blood. Should one soul emerge higher out of the river, centaurs will immediately shoot arrows into them to keep them from escaping. Yeah, that's pretty metal. The second ring is the so-called Wood of the Suicides. Everyone who commits suicide is sent here. They get transformed into thorny and gnarled trees, forever locked in place. In this hell forest, harpies exist which feed on said trees. To put it short, if you commit suicide, you are damned to turn into a tree and to forever be feasted on by harpies. I don't know, this is just so wrong. The third and final ring is a vast desert, where the sands are burning hot and it's raining flames. Here, blasphemers who were violent against God, sodomites who were violent against nature, and usurers, violent against art, are doomed to spend eternity. The blasphemers are forced to lie on the scorching sand, the sodomites run in circles forever being burned by the raining fire, while the usurers crouch, weeping for their unescapable fate. And here again, I have to try to mentally keep my own beliefs and ideals back, but among the damned here are, for example, homosexuals, which, come on, how is that violence against God? The eighth circle, Fraud. Dante descends into the lower parts of hell, having now arrived in the eighth circle, the circle of fraud. This circle has 10 distinct subsections, referred to as malebolge, which translates to evil ditches. In the first malebolgia, seducers and panderers are eternally chased and whipped by demons. The second malebolgia has flatterers forever submerged in excrement, so you know, human shit. Meanwhile, in the third ditch of dread, the simoniacs, who are people who sold sacred things to the church, are placed head down in holes while having their feet burned by flames. Sorcerers are damned to the fourth malebolgia. Fortune tellers have their heads turned backwards and are damned to roam around this forever. A lake of boiling pitch awaits sinners who are sent to the fifth bolgia. Corrupt politicians are stuck in a painfully hot and sticky pitch. Should one of the damned try to get out of the lake of pitch, just like in the first ring in the previous circle, demons called the Male Branche, meaning evil claws, will attack and claw them. In the sixth Bolgia, hypocrites are forced to listlessly wander a narrow path, while wearing leaden robes that are extremely heavy. Thieves get sent to the seventh stitch, where hellish snakes bite them, only for them to turn into ashes and to be born again, continuing the cycle. The counselors of fraud are sent to the next one. Here, any fraudulent advices are constantly ablaze without ever burning up. The penultimate Malebolgia, the ninth, has its own subdivisions, even though it already is a subdivision in itself. Here, various sinners are eternally slashed, hacked, and in different ways. Those who have wrought upon a religious schism have their bodies ripped from groin to chin, with their organs hanging out. Sowers of political discord have their noses cut off and their throats slit. The ones who have caused discord between their own men have their head cuts off, with them wandering holding their own heads. Finally, the last Malebolgia, the one of falsifiers, has the sinners be afflicted with all kinds of horrible diseases and illnesses. At the bottom, Dante reaches the well, which is his transition into the last circle of hell. The ninth circle of hell, treachery. This is the part of hell that is frozen. Lake Cocytus contains the treacherous, those who have betrayed. Like the two previous circles, the last circle is divided by 4 rounds. The first round is Caina, named after the biblical figure and son of Adam and Eve, Cain, who, spoiler alert, killed his brother Abel and thus making him the very first. Those who have betrayed their kindred have their bodies completely covered in ice, with only the head sticking out. The second round is Antenora, named after the Trojan soldier Antenor, who betrayed his city to the Greeks. Here, souls who have betrayed their countries have their heads above the ice, just like the damned in Caina, with the difference being that the souls damned in Antenora cannot bow or bend their necks in any way. Ptolemaea marks the third round, named after Ptolemy, son of Abubus, who betrayed his guests by inviting them to a banquet only to have them killed afterwards. Here, the traitors to their guests are completely entombed in ice, while their tears of regret and pain freeze the eye sockets. They're not even allowed to cry in this part of hell. The last round, called Judeca, contains the traitors to benefactors, lords and rulers. Round 4 is named after Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed Jesus Christ. There are no screams here. It's completely and utterly silent, as the damned here are unable to scream. They are fully encapsulated in ice, in distorted, twisted, and chaotic positions for all eternity. Passed around is the center of hell itself, where Satan is being punished for having committed the greatest of sins, treachery against God. Once an angel named Lucifer, Satan is now trapped waist deep in ice, frantically trying to escape by beating his 6 wings. Ironically, this act itself is what generates the cold winds that freeze this circle. He is eternally weeping from his 6 eyes, and his 3 faces are all chewing on the most unfortunate human souls. The left face chews on Marcus Junius Brutus, and the right one on Gaius Cassius Longinus, the 2 men who assassinated Julius Caesar. Apparently Dante thought that the of Julius Caesar was so bad because it sabotaged a unified Italy. Oh well. The middle face is the most vicious one. Judas Iscariot gets both chewed on and has his back forever flayed and shredded by the devil. So yeah, those were all the fates in hell according to Dante Alighieri. Some of these might differ slightly in adaptations such as the video game or the animated movie, but regardless of the version of the story, it contains a lot of the worst fates ever. Harry Potter. From an ancient book to a much more contemporary one, the Harry Potter franchise made it into this video. I don't think I need to explain what Harry Potter is, since it's one of the most famous stories in modern times. Written by J.K. Rowling, who's a TERF. Sorry, couldn't keep that back. The series tells of a titular boy, Harry Potter, whose parents were murdered by a dark wizard, while he himself survived, marking him with a lightning-shaped scar and giving him the moniker the boy who lived. This being a magical setting, there are ways to doom yourself to horrific fates. Dementor's Kiss. In the Harry Potter universe, there exists a dark and foul spectral monster called a Dementor. Dementors are very mysterious hooded beings who are feared among witches and wizards. They feed off of any happy thoughts and memories. Survivors of such encounters describe it as feeling like all the goodness and happiness has been sucked out of the world. Now, this by itself is pretty ghastly, but it gets worse. In some cases, a Dementor would literally suck out the person's soul without killing them, leaving behind a body that's technically alive but in a perpetual vegetative state. This process is referred to as a Dementor's Kiss, and it is said to be a fate worse than death. Being turned insane by the Cruciatus Curse. In this setting, the parents of the character Neville Longbottom are said to have suffered a fate worse than death. In the story, there are 3 unforgivable curses, which, upon them being used, will guarantee you a place in Azkaban, which is the magical prison. Avada Kedavra is the killing curse, which immediately kills anyone it is cast onto. The second one is the Cruciatus Curse, which essentially is magical torture. An evil hate group in the story called the Death Eaters use the Cruciatus Curse on Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. Those 2 poor people get tortured so much that they turned insane and since have completely forgotten how to speak, who they are and who their son is. Now that is very dark indeed. I've always felt so bad for Neville. The third unforgivable curse is Imperio, which lets the caster have complete control over their victim, which isn't too pleasant either. However, it must be said that the main guy behind the Death Eaters definitely gets his karma. Voldemort being stuck in the afterlife. Voldemort, referred in universe as the one who should not be named, because witches and wizards everywhere fear to speak his name, is one of the main villains of the setting. It was him who murdered Harry's parents. In his quest for immortality, Voldemort, whose original name was Tom Marvolo Riddle, magically splits his soul into multiple pieces. This is among the darkest of magic and is referred to as a Horcrux. A Horcrux can be any object where the dark witch or wizard casts their soul onto. Even when the body dies, the witch or wizard will remain alive because of the Horcrux preserving their soul. In order to fully kill them off, the Horcrux itself needs to be completely annihilated as well, which is a very hard and daunting task. But unbeknownst to Voldemort, those who split their souls via Horcruxes and who die without true repentance are condemned to have their fragments of their soul trapped and in limbo, unable to come back to life, but also unable to pass on. H.P. Lovecraft. From one famous novel series starting with an H to the next one, the works of H.P. Lovecraft absolutely deserve a spot on this list. Howard Philip Lovecraft is among the most famous horror authors, coining the trope name Eldritch Abomination and influencing countless other works. There are many examples of this that would fit here, but to keep it short for an already long video, I wrote down a couple of notable ones. Those who see Gata no Toa. In the story Out of the Eons, an eldritch abomination named Ghathanothoa exists. It is said to be so hideous that merely seeing it will completely petrify the viewer, transforming them into an immortal mummy that remains conscious and stuck like this until someone else puts them out of their misery. Jeez. And might I mention that a sufficiently accurate image or recreation of his looks suffice? Yeah, that's horrifying. Trapped within an eldritch abomination. As the author has it with incomprehensible monsters, in Through the Gates of the Silver Key, a character named Randolph Carter ends up trapped inside a monster that inhabits a planet full of creatures just like itself. He can't change anything about this and is forced to bear witness to this. DCU. The DCU or DC Universe is a shared universe of all the DC published comics. Once established in 1934, there have been hundreds if not thousands of publications, and thus they definitely contain horrible fates worth discussing. Now, I have to say that I'm not really a comic book geek, so my knowledge on the canon is very limited, so don't be surprised if I don't bring up every single example. In the DC comics, there's an overarching villain named Darkseid. Darkseid possesses the power of the Omega Sanction, a beam that when hit by it dooms you to eternally reincarnate into worse and worse lives. This is exactly what happens in the Seven Soldiers of Victory issue of 2005. In the comic, Mr. Miracle gets hit by said beam, and is forced to live each life more horrific than the last. Although this character eventually managed to free himself, Darkseid certainly had many more victims who are still forced to be reborn into progressively worse lives. Delirium's Curse. In the 1989 issue of The Sandman, a character named Delirium condemns one unfortunate police officer to permanently feel the sensation of bugs crawling all over his skin. This poor person gets driven insane by this, ending up in a mental asylum. No wonder. Marvel Comics. Speaking about comics, there's also the Marvel Universe. Marvel is another world-renowned comic publisher that, just like DC, has countless publications not only in comic form, but also in animation. And again, I don't really read this comic, so I don't know that much about them. I will explain what I do know though. The fate of the Master of the World. In the issue Alpha Flight, there is a caveman titled the Master of the World, who gets completely dissected by an extraterrestrial living ship. He does not die by this process. His consciousness gets trapped in the ship's computer and had to spend over 40,000 years in this state before finally gaining control of the ship and ending his misery. That is certainly terrifying. The fate of Magus. In the issue The Infinity War, a character known as Magus managed to get a hold of the Infinity Gauntlet, but with some of the Infinity Stones missing. Said stones, once collected, grant the user unfathomable powers. Instead of that though, what Magus actually gets is that he ends up completely intangible, invisible and inaudible. He's utterly unable to interact or communicate with anyone or anything. So he's eternally no-clipping through the universe. Next time, try to collect all the Infinity Stones. Forever Endeavor. So I might not be a comic book geek, but I am definitely a nerd for Googology. Googology is the study of absurdly huge numbers, the term itself being a reference to the number Google, or 10 to the power of 100, or in layman's terms a 1 with 100 zeros. Fun fact, this is where the search engine Google gets its name from. Anyway, within the Googology community, there's a Googologist named Jonathan Bowers, also known by his alias Hedron Dude. Jonathan wrote a short story and published it on his personal website, the short story being called Forever Endeavor. The Fate of Bentley. In this incomplete short story, a character named Mr. Bentley finds a trampled card on the sidewalk of a busy city. The card has the following sentence written on it. Want to earn lots of money doing something simple? We'll pay you $1 million for making us 10 counters. This is no joke. Contact Jim of Counters Unlimited at 555-counters. For some reason, Mr. Bentley believed this and thus made his way to Counters Unlimited, being greeted by a shady-looking guy giving him the contract to sign. Bentley foolishly signs the contract, whose terms state that the person needs to finish 10 counters before being allowed to go free and be paid. During this, he'd be given meals, breaks, and a bed to sleep in. The procedure will be supervised and supported by a mysterious man simply referred to as compadre, which is Spanish for buddy or friend. And this compadre guy is anything but friendly. Bentley got set up in a dull grey room with compadre. Jim then shut the steel door, locking them both in. Bentley immediately begins his new job. There are wheels marked with the digits 0 to 9 that Bentley has to put on magically extending rods. Seems like an easy way of getting $1 million, right? Well, that's what Bentley thought too. And as it turns out, he was wrong. Horrifically wrong. And he should have read the fine print before brainlessly signing it. The first counter only requires one single wheel to complete. The second one required 10 wheels. And for those of us who understand exponentially fast growing functions, this is where the true horror starts. The third counter requires 10 to the power of 10 wheels, or 10 billion. At first, Bentley is in denial about this, since this could not possibly be true. But for some unexplained reason, there's an inexhaustible amount of wheels in the cardboard box, and he can just attach new wheels onto the rods. Bentley, after realizing this, desperately pleads for Compadre to release him, but the man only knew how to menacingly stare and get Bentley back to his task. Compadre was completely silent the whole time. During the course of the short story, Bentley realizes that he cannot escape this place and that Compadre is never going to help him out. We see the protagonist slowly but surely becoming completely insane. The story is incomplete, but Bentley does finish the third counter after many centuries, where he notices that time seems to be warped in this odd room, as neither him nor Compadre have aged at all. And while you're reading the story on Jonathan's website, you can faintly see a depiction of Compadre staring at you with these soulless yellow eyes. If you understand the algorithm behind how many wheels each counter needs, you realize the unfathomable amount of time Bentley is going to have to spend in this predicament. The formula is as such. The total amount of wheels Bentley has to attach to the rods, also referred to as Bentley's number on the Googology wiki, is equal to this sum. And I know a lot of you might be scared of the math, but I will explain it in layman's terms so that everyone understands. This symbol here, the sigma, is the Greek alphabet uppercase S. In math, this notation denotes a sum, or a number plus another number. The 9 is the amount of iterations of the sum. It says 9, so that means we have 9 numbers being added together. The I equals 0 is the starting value of I. Here, the sum is the following: 10 to the power of 0, which is 1, plus 10 to the power of 1, plus 10 to the power of 10, plus 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 10, and so on and so forth until we reach the power tower of 9 tens. For those of you who still have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, picture this. A power tower or several chained exponents produce ginormous numbers very quickly. As you can see here, a power tower of 4 threes is a number so massive it does not physically fit into the universe. If you tried writing out this number onto every single atom, you couldn't, because 3 to the power of 3 to the power of 3 to the power of 3 is so huge that you would just run out of atoms to write it on. And we have multiple numbers like these in a sum, and as more exponents there are, the more the numbers grow. And now we have multiple numbers like these in a sum. Bentley is going to spend more time putting wheels on counters than the life expectancy of stars. To compare it, our Sun, a G2V type star, will last at least another 4.5 billion years. Spectral M-class stars, also referred to as red dwarfs in astronomy, can shine their light for trillions of years. In about a Google to a Googleplex years, according to cosmology, all the black holes of the universe are said to have completely evaporated. And according to certain calculations involving quantum tunneling, in about 10 to the power of 1,500 years, a hypothetical star type known as an iron star is said to have the odds of spontaneously appear. Eons for humans, and yet those numbers might as well be 0 compared to the amount of time Bentley has to spend putting freaking wheels onto rods, while only being able to sleep for 5 hours every night and having to make do with stale pancakes and bologna sandwiches. Yeah, read the fine print next time. Well, this isn't as bad as some other fates in this video, since, it is a truly titanic number, but it's still finite and therefore not eternal. I really hope that Jonathan Bowers will continue to write this short story. It's a Good Life. From a non-finished short story to a long since finished one, now we have It's a Good Life. It's a Good Life is a short story written by Jerome Bixby and published in 1953. The Twilight Zone has remade the story multiple times as well. So what is it about? In the small town of Peaksville, Ohio, an anomalous boy named Anthony Fremont exists. For reasons never explained, Anthony is nigh omnipotent. Just by thinking about something, it will become reality. He can transform people or animals into anything he wishes, be it another species or an object. He can bring dead people back to life, teleport himself. He's able to fully read minds, among otherwise impossible feats. And very unfortunately, the kid is, well, kind of a little shit. At least in the Twilight Zone adaptation. In the original short story, it's a toddler who doesn't really know any better, which, while being tragic, doesn't make it any less terrifying. The kid separated Peaksville from the rest of the world, making the inhabitants forever trapped and completely cut off. The townsfolk lived terrifying lives, having to force themselves thinking good thoughts about Anthony, or else they might become victim of his rage. When Anthony is really angry and displeased, he sends his victims to the cornfield, which is a presumably infinite area of just a cornfield, nothing else, where it's implied that the people who get sent here have to spend eternity in. Very oddly specific, but nonetheless a very interesting and terrifying writing prompt. Hyperion Cantos. The Hyperion Cantos saga is a series of science fiction novels written by Dan Simmons. Just like some of the other novels on this list, this canon holds a vast amount of worlds, fractions, and civilizations. It would be too numerous to mention them all here, but one entity in the setting that many fear is the Shrike. The victims of the Shrike. The Shrike is a mysterious, half-mechanical, half-organic, four-armed eldritch abomination that resides on the planet Hyperion. Its motivations and origins are unclear, but what is clear is the fact that you never want to be captured by the Shrike. The captured victims of the Shrike get impaled on a massive metallic tree. The impaled stay conscious and are unable to die because said tree prevents them from doing so. Why the Shrike does this is unknown, but I'm not sure whether or not anyone should come close to investigate. Yeah, better not risk it. Ultramars. Ultramars, a billion-year chronicle of the myriad species and mixed fortunes of man, is a speculative evolution sci-fi book written by C.M. Koseman and published in 2006. Koseman himself has stated that he's currently working on an updated version, but as of the making of this video, this updated version has not been officially released yet, just so you know. In the far future, humans have further evolved themselves into starmen, genetically engineered men for space travel. As the starmen colonize multiple systems, they suddenly get attacked by an alien species referred to as the Q. The Q, being several billions of years old and having traveled through multiple spiral arms, completely curb-stomped the starmen. As a punishment to opposing them, the Q alter the starmen into grotesque parodies of themselves, genetically engineered to fit specific environmental and ecological niches, while reducing their cognition to the level of today's wild animals. While those can be seen as horrid fates, some definitely got the short end of the stick when it comes to their gruesome transformation. The Mantelopes. Remember when I said that their cognition or sapience got removed by the Q? Well, that's not entirely true, as there's one fraction called the Mantelopes who got to keep their human level intelligence. For the worst. You see, they were transformed into quadrupedal antelope-like beings who possess human intellects. Without hands and opposable thumbs, the Mantelopes found themselves to be unable to change their environment in any way. Due to this impotence, the Mantelopes' culture is a melancholic and nihilistic one. The last sapient Mantelopes spent their days singing about their anguish, until natural selection finally dumbed them down. Because, as it turns out, with a body like this, having superior intelligence is not a gift, but a curse. The Colonials. Those starmen who successfully fought off multiple waves of Q before losing to them got by far the worst fate. In the story they are referred to as the Colonials. The Q, out of rage, transformed those who dared oppose them into boneless slabs of flesh, which were tiled in an intricate net with other slabs of flesh. Each slab was once a person, and now they are unable to move and are forced to work as a filtration system for the Q waste. Ugh. And just like with the Mantelopes, the colonial minds were left perfectly intact in order for them to be conscious of their miserable existence. This would have been among the worst if it wasn't for the fact that millions of years later, the colonials evolved into the modular people, finally freeing them from this agony, and that is a massive W. Night's Dawn Trilogy. On to another great book, or books. The Night's Dawn Trilogy is the next entry on this list. It's an epic space opera series written by Peter F. Hamilton. And just like the science fiction stories that came before this video, there are horrible fates awaiting souls in this universe. The Mélange. Turns out there is an afterlife in this story, but it does not have anything to do with being judged according to one's sins. It's essentially entropy. Picture this. You die and find yourself among thin and cold clouds of gases. You notice that the clouds pass you. It's cold and you can barely move. Suddenly, out of the infinite darkness, horrid winged abominations with impossible mixed anatomy start approaching you. Those monsters steal away all the warmth that you have left. After a while, you pass them, but as more time passes, the more of these grotesque creatures will feed on you. And then, you notice that the fog was not blowing past you, but you were falling through it. You fall below into the so-called melange. This is the afterlife awaiting practically every soul. Your dead soul becomes part of the melange, the inevitable end of entropy, where every single species in the multiverse is consuming one another, clawing, biting, tearing at each other, eating their completely alien memories. All of you are cold and in agony. Beings absorbing and merging constantly, some of them becoming quite strong, being able to lift themselves out of the melange. But this is only temporary. Falling back to the melange is inevitable. Jeez, no wonder people in this universe destroy their souls, because not existing or being conscious is so much better than, well, this mother. Let's talk about a video game for a change. Among my favorite franchises is the Mother series, made by Shigesato Itoi. In the West, the second game is more commonly known as Earthbound. It's a very quirky deconstruction of the JRPG genre, set in a contemporary setting with aliens, psychic powers, hot coffee cups and abstract art attacking you. I can just suggest playing the games yourselves. English patches and other translations can be found, but aren't exactly legal, so I'm not going to talk about how to get that, but I am going to be talking about a specific character. A character I really despise. It's the little shithead known as Porky Minch. Porky Minch's fate in Mother 3. Oh Porky, I already slandered you verbally and destroyed you in a Gmod in a video I made in 2013. Wow, it really has been that long, huh? And guess what? I still hate him. But he did make it onto this list, so how does the bratty little end up in Mother 3? In the ending, a mad scientist named Dr. Andernuts, who you can also meet in other installments, invented something that he coins as the absolutely safe capsule. Anything that gets sealed inside this capsule will be absolutely safe. The character Porky Minch uses this to escape the consequences of his actions. However, Dr. Andernuts did not give this capsule a way to reopen the door once it has been shut. There's absolutely no way to get Porky out of there, and Porky, having been made immortal through unsafe time traveling, is forced to stay inside this capsule until the end of time. The stars may die and the black holes will evaporate. That capsule is going to float in empty space until existence itself ends. Now, this would maybe be a fitting end to such a vile character, if it weren't for the fact that it is implied that he enjoys this, which really gives me conflicted feelings, but yeah, get f***ed, Porky, you suck. Yu Hakusho. From one Japanese franchise to another, this time it being an anime, there's a specific scene from Yu Hakusho that is an excellent pick for this list. In the anime, a character known as Elder Toguro challenged Kurama to a battle. Kurama plants a parasitic tree onto Torogu's body, which grows into a hellspawn tree that makes its victim hallucinate something terrifying, while they slowly digest the afflicted person. But because Elder Toguro is immortal, he is essentially stuck in this state, until maybe someone can free him. Elder Toguro is forced to hallucinate losing the mantle over and over again, while being painfully drained by a tree. Oh, yikes. The 500 million year button. The 500 million year button is a video originally uploaded onto the Japanese web video hosting site Nico Nico Doga, but a version with English subtitle is watchable on YouTube. To put it briefly, we follow the protagonist Tsunero as he is looking for a new job. Joining him are Tonyo and Jaita. Jaita is telling Tsunero how he got fired and is looking for a new job as well. Out of nowhere, Tonyo pulls out an enigmatic button and claims that whoever pushes said button will instantly get 1 million yen, which approximately amounts to 6,000 euros or $6,500. The catch, however, is that after someone presses the titular button, their consciousness gets warped into an endless void of nothing, where they are unable to die or sleep for 500 million years. Once these 500 million years are over, the consciousness gets instantly returned to the body at the exact moment where they were done pushing the button, while having their memory of the 500 million years spent in a void completely erased. This makes it seem, especially from a third-person perspective, to have done nothing at all. First, Tsunero watches Jaita push the button and instantly getting 1 million yen, being ecstatic about his newfound wealth. Tsunero then proceeds to push the button himself, and we get to see from his perspective what happens when he is sent to the void. In a kind of humorous twist of fate, while in the void for hundreds of millions of years, he becomes a godlike ascended being, having had all the time in the world to think about existence. But then, the 500 million years are up, we see Tsunero returning back to his body, getting his memory erased and thinking nothing has happened, and then getting 1 million yen. I mean, that's not even a whole lot of money. I mean, it's just 6,000 euros? I wouldn't do this for 1 billion or 1 trillion euros. The video ends as Tsunero goes for a 16-round barrage, meaning that he has to endure 8 billion years of this void. What an idiot. The boiled one phenomenon. From one quirky internet thing to another, one of my patrons, Kaiser Karmazin, brought a particular web horror anthology to my attention, namely the so-called The Boiled One phenomenon. The Boiled One phenomenon is an analog horror series created by Silas O'Brien, who on YouTube is known as Dr. Nowhere. It documents a hijacked broadcast channel by a mysterious organization called Ephrata 228, who are trying to protect viewers of the phenomenon known as Fen 228, or the Boiled One. It's another one of these entities that are essentially a cognitohazard or a brown note, so the mere act of observing it or knowing about it is harmful in and of itself. Someone affected by the Boiled One will, if they don't get treated early enough, put in a pseudo-coma, completely paralyzed with the exception of being able to look around and blink, while fully conscious. One thing you are now doomed to see is the Boiled One, as he is watching over you forever. The unaffected are unable to save Fen 228, but the victims are locked in the state, unable to escape, hearing thousands of screams and trumpets, signaling the end times. And because I just showed you the Boiled One, you are also never going to be able to be alone again. Thanks, Kaiser Karmazin. Hellraiser. Hellraiser is a series based on the novella The Hellbound Heart, written by Clive Barker. The movies since have overshadowed the novella in terms of popularity. In the story, an artifact known as the Lament Configuration exists. Those who solve the puzzle get condemned to be taken to hell by beings called the Xenobites. Solving this has absolutely no reward or benefit. You just get taken to hell to get tortured. All I can say is, do not solve it. Classical mythology. Ah yes, the classical Greek myth. The stories of old told a myriad times across human civilization. And as a lot of you might already know, the Greek mythos does not shy away from eternal torment. The fate of Prometheus. In the mythos, Prometheus was an important figure. It was him who brought the fire from the gods to mankind. This, however, enraged Zeus, and as a punishment, he chained Prometheus to a rock. He was doomed to remain there, having his liver being eaten by an eagle every day. Because Prometheus is a god, he is immortal, and the liver kept regenerating. While this is pretty bad, one day another Greek hero, Heracles, took pity on his plight and rescued him from this awful fate. The fate of Tantalus. This one is much more deserving in my eyes. A character known as Tantalus murdered his own people and tried to feed them to the gods. Disgusted by this wicked sin, the gods damned Tantalus to eternal torment in Tartarus, the Greek version of hell. Tantalus is now forever hungry and thirsty. He is placed close to a pool of water, as well as fruit dangling from a tree above his head. Whenever Tantalus tries to drink the water, it would drain away instead. If he tried reaching the fruit, they would be blown out of reach by the wind. This is actually where the word tantalizing or to tantalize comes from. And Tantalus wasn't the only one being condemned to the Greek underworld. The fate of Sisyphus. This is a very famous one, if not one of the most well-known ones. Sisyphus got punished by the gods for cheating death, however he managed to do that. And now he is forced to roll a heavy boulder up a slope for eternity. Just when he was able to reach the top of the slope, the rock would just tumble all the way down, forcing Sisyphus to start over again. Sisyphus believes that he can cheat his way out of this one, but little does he know that he is eternally stuck in an unwinnable condition. Just don't anger the gods, okay? The fate of the Danaids. The Danaids were a group of 49 wives who killed their respective husbands. They were damned by the gods to fill a water through, using jars with no bottom in one story, and in some other variations of the tale, the jar is full of holes. So, just like Sisyphus, they're forced to complete a task that's impossible to complete. Although it's nearly not as bad as the other one. The fate of Ixion. Ixion is a king in the Greek mythos who tried to rape Hera while being a guest at Zeus. Wow, I mean, this is just f***ing unbelievable. For this unrivaled stupidity and heinousness, Zeus damned Ixion to Tartarus, where he is now strapped to a burning wheel for all eternity. I mean, what do you expect would happen? The fate of Typhon. And the last sorry soul on this list who gets punished by Zeus is Typhon. Zeus threw Mount Etna on top of him, and now Typhon is trapped forever, his immortal rage causing the mountain to erupt and spew lava. I guess that's how volcanoes work. American Horror Story. Okay, before I start, I gotta say that I have not watched American Horror Story. However, I used to have a nail artist who did watch the show religiously, and she did tell me about a specific scene in Covert that I never forgot, and I thought to myself, yeah, that would fit very well into this video. So apparently in the setting, witchcraft apprentices have to successfully complete certain tasks in order to become fully fledged witches. The magical tests consist of ascending to hell and making it back out. In case you fail this task, you get prematurely stuck in hell, so maybe it's one of the greatest risks you could possibly take. In the episode, we followed the characters Misty, Queenie, Madison, Cordelia and Fiona, descending into their personal hells. For Misty, her hell consists of having to live one of the most painful days, where she had to euthanize a lab frog in a science class. For Queenie, hell means being stuck working for a fried chicken restaurant that she hated. Madison's hell traps her on a set of a horrible production forever. Cordelia is forced to plead for a mother's affection, only to be rejected for eternity. And finally, Fiona's hell means her being married to an ugly, stinking serial killer, living in the disgusting and rotten shack. All of the witches pass the test, except Misty, who gets stuck in hell. Pokémon. Now onto a franchise that I know a lot about, the good old Pokémon franchise. Ah yes, Pokémon. I myself have been a fan ever since I received Pokémon Blue in 1998. And even though the series mainly targets children as its audience, it does, surprisingly, have its very own gruesome fates. Getting stuck in the distortion world. In the story of the 4th generation games, Pokémon Pearl, Diamond and Platinum version, a villain named Cyrus tries to gain control of the legendary Pokémon Palkia and Dialga, in order to reshape the universe in his image. This goes horribly wrong, however, and the legendaries are having absolutely none of that. So Giratina ends up appearing and drags Cyrus into its own domain, the Distortion World. It's a chaotic realm where space and time do not function normally. It's implied that Cyrus cannot die here, and he's unable to age or starve in the Distortion World, so he's pretty much doomed to roam this chaotic dimension alone. And again, stop angering the gods. This never goes well, regardless of the franchise. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon. Bad ending. Alongside the main games, there's a series of spin-off games called Mystery Dungeon, where you play not as a trainer or a human, but as a Pokémon. The main plot is essentially Dialga having been corrupted into an evil shadow form, causing havoc. Should the player get the bad ending, the characters will be eternally stuck in time, because said primal Dialga has frozen time. And there we have it, another eternally frozen in one moment fate. What is it with these? Ugh. Black Mirror. Black Mirror is a UK science fiction horror anthology series produced and primarily written by Charlie Brooker. The show explores themes of dystopias and techno-paranoia, with dark and satirical undertones. While I've not watched every episode, there are some fates that did come to mind. White Bear. In the episode White Bear, a woman is punished for a heinous crime. She watched and filmed the burning of a kidnapped child. As a punishment, she's being chased around by maniacs while simultaneously getting recorded by bystanders and onlookers who refuse to help her. It then gets revealed that, at the end of each day, the criminal's mind gets wiped, so that she has to go through the same day again and again and again. White Christmas. I think this might be one of my favorite Black Mirror episodes. White Christmas centers around the concept of a cookie, which is a copy of the consciousness of a person. Those cookies can be inserted into a smart housekeeping system for the person the cookie was copied from. However, the copy is fully aware and conscious, but it thinks that it itself is the original person. In the episode, a cookie from a woman goes insane because she refuses the work she gets. The salesman of the cookie technology then proceeds to torture her into submission by fast-forwarding the perceived time. Eventually, every cookie cracks and ends up doing the menial jobs because in this wide void there's nothing else to do, so you might as well. And them being a simulated mind, they are unable to age, die, or escape. Another instance of a cookie gets trapped in a small cabin in a snowy area. The salesman of the first cookie returns, working as an interrogator in this scene. It turns out that the original person ended up being the cause of multiple deaths. The police interrogated the cookie because the original human refused to talk. After getting the necessary information out of the cookie, the shitty-ass police then proceed to make it even worse by changing the perceived time to 1,000 years a minute and leave it running like this over the Christmas holidays. I mean, come on, is this really necessary? You already got your informations, you assholes. Why do this? This is demented. The poor cookie ends up stuck in an inescapable shed for over 2 million years, with a Christmas song blaring in the background. That surely made me shudder. The Infinite Jest. One of the most unique books that I have ever read is The Infinite Jest, written by David Foster Wallace. The novel has 4 distinct subplots, and I'm going to delve into only one of them. In one of those stories, there's a film that essentially acts as a brown note or a cognito hazard. Anyone who watches the tape are put into a catatonic state, where they only ever want to watch the film over and over and over again. It's never really described what the film shows, but maybe I don't want to find out after all. The Eternally Shortening Loop short story. I remember reading a short story in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, which was about a team of people getting trapped in a time loop that steadily got shorter. Initially, the loop lasted hours, then it got shortened to minutes, and then seconds. The poor souls are eternally trapped in the exact same sequence of events. While the protagonist is still able to think coherent thoughts, He postulates that either the Earth has fallen into a singularity, or that time in the universe was somehow ending. At the end, the loop gets so short that no one even has the time to end the thought. Does this save them from actually being turned completely mad? I never got an answer to this question. Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist is a popular manga written by Hiromu Arakawa, which later got adapted into an anime twice. The story revolves around the ancient concept of alchemy, or the power to transmutate matter. Usually, if an alchemist wishes to use alchemy, there has to be an equal exchange. However, it is rumored that a certain item exists that lets an alchemist do alchemy without any additional costs. It is the renowned Philosopher's Stone, and it is indeed real in the story. However, as the main characters study this stone, they realize that in order to create one has to trap countless of living souls into the stone. And yes, those trapped souls are the energy source, and they are screaming in agony. No wonder that one of the main characters calls it the work of the devil. Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov is among my favorite authors. I really enjoyed his works. They really scratched that brain itch of sci-fi what-ifs. And among his works are gruesome fates that I wanted to share with you. Risk. In Isaac Asimov's story Risk, there's an experimental spacecraft that lets users traverse hyperspace. The catch is, kind of like in The Jaunt, in the Stephen King entry, that if any life form enters the spacecraft, they lose all higher cognitive functions and end up sitting in their own excrement, too catatonic to do anything. And no, they don't die from this, so a mercy kill would maybe be the only thing you could do to help such an afflicted soul. Blank. In another short story of his, called Blank, the protagonist invents a time machine. This, however, goes horribly wrong. Already during its maiden voyage does the time machine malfunction, and it ends up getting jammed between two adjacent moments in time. The scientists try to solve the issue, opening the capsule door in order to diagnose the problem. This was a huge mistake, as the normal time in the capsule is now leaking out of the door. Time runs slower and slower, and eventually, just like in the Loop short story, they eventually become stuck in time forever. Ursula Le Guin. Ursula Le Guin is yet another favorite author of mine. I love her sci-fi works, especially the fact that her character writing is usually of a much higher quality than what most other hard sci-fi writers bring to the table. And just as some of my other favorite authors' works, her works do include fates that are horrifying. Those Who Walk Away from Omelas. This short story, written in 1973, revolves around the titular utopian city known as Omelas. Omelas is described as a utopia. There is no scarcity, no one has to be homeless or suffer from diseases. Everyone is happy and can follow their dreams. And as you might have guessed, this being on my list, there's a catch. As it turns out, the twist is that this utopia is somehow powered by one forsaken child who gets perpetually tormented. So the torment of one child is what powers the utopia. Everyone in Omelas is shown this at least once, and then they get to decide whether to stay in Omelas or to walk away from it. What would you do? Changing Planes. In one of Ursula Le Guin's anthologies, Changing Planes, there exists a dimension known as the Island of the Immortals. One interdimensional traveler visits the island to see what it really is about. On the island, a group of immortal people live. The island itself is described as being shabby, and it's completely infested by an odd species of fly. Heavy diamonds can also be found on the grounds. Puzzled by this, the traveler asks an immortal what these diamonds are about. It is then revealed that those diamonds used to be immortals, who were shaped into diamonds by time and pressure, while still somehow being conscious. Oh no. The source of the immortality is that odd fly I talked about, whose bite turns you into an immortal. So unless you want to end up as a permanently conscious diamond, you better not step onto this island at all. Alright, so this has been my list of the worst fates I came across in fiction. I realized that there are more fates that I could have come up with, but I felt like this video got already too bloated, so I decided to leave it like it is now. If there's something you think might be missing, then feel free to write a comment down below. Which fate do you think is the worst? I hope the video was entertaining for you. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. My name is infiniteomniverse. Thank you so much for watching the video. Special thanks goes to all of my Patreons and donors, which are Cosmic Ham, James Carson, Kaiser Karmazin, Alex, The Fiery Charmeleon, Philip Farrell, Jeremy Work, and Classic. Again, thank you so much for your loyalty and support, and see you next time. Happy Halloween!